So, good afternoon. So, yes, I'm Peter. I'm a Daoist medicine practitioner, Daoist Qi Gong practitioner. I work as a health consultant. I'm also a lecturer in history and philosophy of Chinese medicine at the Southern School of Natural Therapies, hence the slideshow. So, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional guardians of this country, the Wurundjeri people, and honour the memory of the clever man William Barrack. And also I want to express my humble gratitude to all the caretakers of this land from the beginning of time to the present, including the current custodians of this small patch we call Second Story Studios, and of course Jada and her team for setting this up in the first place and giving me the opportunity to speak to you all about this topic. Now there's a saying in a book, an ancient book called the Tao Te Ching that goes, "He who speaks does not know, and he who knows does not speak." I want to acknowledge that I'm not actually a Taoist, nor am I an expert on Taoism or some kind of expert on sexual practices or a Qigong master or anything like that. I'm actually just really interested in this stuff. I'm passionate about it. It fascinates me intellectually. It stirs something within me, and I just want to share this information with you because it's been an important part of my life too. So I want to offer the wonder and awe that is Daoist sexual alchemy. I want to offer it also as an inclusive model of sexuality and of sacredness. And I also want to explain briefly how within this framework, sexuality, sacredness, and health and well-being are actually combined. So, lurid picture number one. It's just about entertainment, folks. Our journey begins in the 2nd century BCE. There were some silk texts found in a nobleman's tomb, and amongst the many texts that were found in this tomb was a bunch of sex manuals. One of these texts is called the 10 Questions. It concerns itself with what to do to live a long and healthy life. Now, I've written actually about that in a previous issue of Living Now, so you can go and read all about that. But one of the things that was really interesting in that text is one of the key things to longevity, and I quote, "Have plenty of sexual intercourse." So for the ancient Chinese, longevity is a very real, pragmatic concern with living as long as possible, which is only possible if you're as healthy as possible. So in these sex manuals, we're given the details on how sex will lead to a long and healthy life. And we're told in one section, no human energy is more essential than sexual energy. When sexual energy is stifled, the 100 channels become ill. Longevity is all a matter of sexual energy. In another section of the text, it states, the preservation of sexual energy goes along with its development. Therefore, masters of the Tao discovered exercises such as extending the hands downward, massaging the arms, and rubbing the belly to follow yin-yang. Those who suffer from chronic ailments invariably have a leakage of sexual vitality, congestion of energy channels, and emotional instability. They do not understand the great Tao, so living energy leaves them. So keep this in mind that China at this time, as it is throughout history and even till at this point, is a very patriarchal culture, and in some eras brutally so. So I just want to acknowledge that because historians such as myself have a tendency to romanticize the past. So I want to just make that clear. This is a very patriarchal culture. And so these texts, it was very clear that their audience was actually for men. The audience of the text is for the male readership. So in many respects, these practices in these texts are really useful when it comes to working with men's health and andrology. And this has been the basis of my work within Daoist medicine, Chinese medicine, over the last few years, dealing with such things as infertility and prostatitis and so on and so forth. And many of you will be familiar with the idea of preventing ejaculation or withholding ejaculation. This is also made clear in this same text where it says the way to extend life involves watching over the closing off of the flow of semen. So it's an important part. To prevent ejaculation means to preserve and develop that sexual energy within the male, of course. Lurid photo number 2. This work, however, is not just for men. So the texts are also clear that a man being a good lover is also good for the women, with instructions on how he should treat the women in these spaces. And I quote again from the same text, "The way to embrace a woman requires peaceful serenity of heart, so the body and the mood calm one another." In another text, it's actually called Joining Yin-Yang. It provides very clear instructions for how the man should please the woman. Now, I do also acknowledge this is obviously incredibly heterosexual, so that was their culture. So, this particular passage starts off with, "Hold hands and begin stroking from the wrists, following the arms up to the armpits, then up to the shoulders and to the neck area. Stroke around the neck, then down the hollow of the collarbone, over the nipples, across the belly and up to the ribs. Reaching the vulva, massage the clitoris, suck in energy to vitalize the spirit, and you can see forever and survive as long as the universe." How we going? It continues. "The clitoris is the vessel of intercourse. Stroke it from below upward, causing the whole body to be pleasurably excited and the feelings to be joyfully delighted. Even though you want to, do not perform the act yet. Hug and kiss to loosen up and have fun." One of the beautiful things about this tradition is they certainly knew how to have fun. The instructions given in another text describe such thing as foreplay being mutually satisfactory, gliding in and out gently and with control, withdraw while still having an erection, not having intercourse if she's experiencing pain. So they've actually written this. Doing it breathlessly and inwardly out of control is called emotional disturbance. Forcing it when there is no desire causes alienation. So it's not just about the man learning to withhold the ejaculation and preserve his jing, his vital energy. It's also good for the women, because that also cultivates the sexual energy. It preserves the jing with her as well. And so with sex and the combination of these Qi Gong exercises that they also describe, it frees the flow of Qi through the channels and thus maintains that flow of biochemical and neurological substances and information throughout the physiology. So if this happens, we live to a ripe old age, having lots of juicy orgasmic sex, and we're all happy campers, like these two. Lurid photo number 3. So fast forward to the Middle Ages, so somewhere between the 10th and 16th centuries CE, the Song and Ming dynasties. Taoism has evolved no different to the Chinese culture that's evolved over this time. Now, there is a school within the Daoist tradition referred to as the Complete Reality School. They emerged quite early, but came into its own during the Ming dynasty. And it synthesizes Taoist philosophy and mysticism with both Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, as well as the virtue ethics and personal cultivation ethos of Confucianism. And it had 2 main branches. The northern branch was essentially a school of monasteries filled with monks devoted to enlightenment, which they referred to as attaining the Tao. And that was done through stilling the monkey mind in order to discipline and tame the physical body. So this is the branch that gives us the amazing martial arts traditions that we're probably all very familiar with. The southern branch, on the other hand, is different. This branch was interested in making the work available to normal, everyday people in normal, everyday lives. So it wasn't a school for people to remove themselves from society to perfect themselves. It was about living your life and trying to do this work. So as such, the normal people, the lay people, came to the practices quite late in life, so they're already considered to have lost a considerable amount of this jing, this sexual energy, especially if they'd had kids. So in other words, normal life has taken its toll, and the physical body has its normal wear and tear, which was avoided in the northern branch. You went and lived in a monastery, you removed yourself from society, you didn't suffer the leakage. So what was developed was this idea of dual cultivation. And it was encouraged in the southern branch because it was recognised that it would be easy to generate the necessary sexual energy for the internal alchemy practices to be done with a partner if you've already lost a whole lot. So what was the practice? Obviously, I don't have the time to model this on stage for you, nor would I think my partner would approve of that. So I'm going to give you an overview of the theory of the practice. And it comes down to this cosmological understanding of yin-yang and the Tao. So you're probably all very familiar with that symbol. In short, first there was a void of nothingness. Then came somethingness, which creates a polarity. Nothingness, somethingness. These polarities essentially intertwine and dance and interrelate with one another, thus producing an infinite spectrum of everything that exists, which is what that symbol represents. And it's everything that exists between somethingness and nothingness. And this is what's called existence. This is the Tao. Even within everything that exists in this spectrum, there is still this primary polarity being recognized as being present. And the entire universe is described as having these two states, a kind of a primal pure state and the other bit being referred to as a conditioned state or a delusional state, to use a Buddhist term. Humans, us, we're a microcosm of this. So we've got these polarities within us also. But because we're part of what is referred to as the post-heaven existence, we have this desire, this innate tendency to want to re-evolve back towards the pure state. And this is this idea of enlightenment, or attaining the Tao, also referred to as pre-heaven. So these symbols represent these. The polarities are called heaven and earth in what's referred to as the pre-heaven, or in the pure state of enlightenment. The two polarities are referred to as heaven and earth. But in the conditioned state that we all exist in, or maybe some of us, the polarities are referred to as fire and water. And these symbols, which come from the I Ching, the Book of Changes, are just symbols to represent these two. And as you can see, fire and water, they've got a yang and a yin line transposed. The yang line being the solid line, the yin being the broken line, just to mention. So the purpose of internal alchemy is to remove all the layers of conditioning, like conditioning that's come through family culture, through culture, society culture, education, and so on and so forth. And it means that we want to return to that pure enlightened state. Because that is the nature of what the universe wants. We should also state it's not just because we want to do that, the entire universe also wants to return to this pure state. The first step to this process within us requires a great deal of energy, and the only energy that has the power to do this is sexual energy, is the Jing. This is what they've said. Hence the dual cultivation practices. If you've got enough Jing, because you've looked after yourself, or you've been living in a monastery all your life and never ejaculated or something like that, then it's fine. You've got enough juice to power the firing process. But for most of us, we haven't necessarily been that way. So we need to get that energy with one another to essentially remove the yin from the fire and put it back into the water, and remove the yang from the water and put it back into the fire to create heaven and earth. So when you're doing the dual cultivation practices, you actually have to do it with someone who also is trained and proficient in these practices, because otherwise you're taking the energy from the other person. So both parties have to be involved in the practice. They have to both be part of the dual cultivation practice. If humans are a microcosm of the universe and we create these polarities internally, we've both got yin-yang, we've both got heaven-earth. So it doesn't matter actually about the gender of the people involved in the practice, because it doesn't matter. Why? Because one of the the stipulations with the practice is, of course, that you release the attachments of lust, of desire. This is the influence of Buddhism on this practice. Releasing the attachments of lust and desire and love and so on and so forth in this practice, because all that you're doing is helping one another cultivate enough of the sexual energy to release it and attain enlightenment. So the gender doesn't actually therefore matter, technically speaking. So it really then comes down to personal preference, I guess. The other thing which is really interesting, I find really interesting about the model, is because it's referring to these abstract concepts of yin-yang, of heaven and earth, we're not getting bogged down in the anthropomorphization of these energies, which in the Tantric and the Vedantic Tantric model we get bogged down in, or a lot of people get bogged down in, Shivas being masculine or male and Shakti being female. So this becomes irrelevant because of the removal of the anthropomorphization. So once the sexual energy is being cultivated, it's then used in further aspects of the practice to attain the Tao, to reach this enlightened state. And then it's brought back into the normal human vessel to carry on normal daily life, but in this enlightened state. And this is the influence of the Zen school, or the Chan. In China it was called the Chan Buddhist school. And it's exemplified obviously by the aphorism, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So this is the difference with this particular school and their focus on sexual alchemy, is to bring it back, not to become divine, but in actual fact, just to become more human. So there's so much more to this practice and this philosophy, and I could go on for hours, and if you give me the chance, I will. So I'll just finish up. In conclusion, I just want to leave you with this image of a statue of a dwarf with very large feet. Thank you very much.